We've all been there, at least once in our lives, crushing on someone. Now, I don't know about you, but I was a shy kid, so talking to a girl I liked was a pretty difficult task. Frankly, I had no idea what I was doing. Like any idiot boy, I often looked at fiction targeted to boys to try and understand girls, which was a mistake. More times than not, girls and women in fiction written for men are essentially there to fulfill the male fantasy. They're unrealistic and don't really share the truth about women, but what they want you to think women are and what women want. So not really the best place to go when you're trying to understand girls. Unfortunately, that includes manga. But now I can somewhat confidently say that I found it. After all these years, the one manga series that I wish I could have read back then. This manga, written by a woman, for women, is perfect for young boys, and the series is O Maidens in Your Savage Season. Education purposes aside, this is a genuinely awesome series that features an immaculate cast of characters, mostly all women, going through the harsh landscapes of romance, sex, friendship, and above else, self-discovery. So let's talk about O Maidens in Your Savage Season. But before we get started though, I'd like to welcome you to MangAnalysis, where I do little reviews of the manga I've been reading. If you like what you see and would like to see more, make sure to subscribe and leave a like. Maybe even leave a comment. Let's get a conversation going. O Maidens in Your Savage Season, hereby referred to as Maidens, is written by Mari Okada and illustrated by Naoe Emoto. It takes place in your typical Japanese high school, and more specifically, with its literature club. This club has 5 members: oblivious Kazusa, fragile beauty Nina, innocent summer child Momoko, prudish strict club leader Rika, and mysterious writer Itoha. Together, they read books, discuss them, and hold debates, and go out for ice cream. The books they start reading, however, become more mature in style, start to feature more and more erotic content. Each of them has their own interpretation of this content, and sex as a whole, such as curiosity, disdain, fear, confusion, and indifference. But one thing is common for all of them: they know nothing about it. How does it work? Is it weird? Does it hurt? Do I need to love my partner? Does it need to be with the opposite sex? Can I just not do it? Read on as these 5 girls get thrown into a world of confusion as they try to figure themselves out and what it means to be in love, to be different, to be curious, and how all of that links back to the very famous yet very scary 3-letter word that is sex, or Cross, as they themselves refer to it, because they cringe every time they have to say the actual word. Anyway, moving on. Alright, so the first thing I really enjoyed about the series, like I mentioned before, is that it's written by women for women, but it can be just as easily enjoyed by men. Growing up, I read lots of series where romance was a big part of the story, and more often than not, if it was written by men, the main character was male, and then the female characters often felt unrealistic, stereotypical, or built for the male fantasy, which wasn't super great. You can't really get a real picture of what the girls around you are really like from reading stuff like that. But Maidens is different. It's written by a woman, so the depictions of the female characters are really well done, as one would expect. What's interesting, however, is that I still wouldn't consider this a shoujo, which is the type of manga that's usually more women-based. Maidens is pretty realistic, can be grimy and awkward and weird, and portrays teenagers really well as confused, angsty, cringy, horny little monsters that have the capability to make mistakes, express themselves, and grow. Not that shoujo ignores all those things, but in my experience, it's usually glossed over with a nice layer of rainbows and idealism, which is super not the case here. I also noticed that the men from this series aren't the usual, either gross, exaggerated perverts that are often seen in shonen, or the overly idealized chivalrous knights that are seen in shoujo, but find themselves in a sweet middle ground. Curious, yet not degenerates, which honestly feels pretty real to me. As a guy who was once a teenager, I felt represented very well by the male cast of this series. I can't speak for women, but from my point of view, the girls felt real. They stood above the usual dere tropes and stereotypes and truly did feel like 3-dimensional characters. They all had their own experiences with Cross and their own issues revolving around it, which led to awesome character development and self-discovery. It was also super neat to read a series that was able to portray sex as more than just a physical, perverse interaction between 2 people, or the big bad thing that happens after holding hands, but instead delved way deeper into its intricacies and complexities without having to rely on explicitness or fan service. So again, if you're a guy and you're sick of reading manga, or any fiction really, that portrays women really poorly and can only lead to horrible misogynistic views and horrible future misunderstandings, because don't forget, I read that girls in manga like that sort of stuff, isn't a real excuse for acting like an idiot around women, then I cannot recommend this series enough. The next big thing I love about this series is the cast. I already sort of mentioned this, but the girls in the story are amazing. They're so lovable. So I mentioned that they defy stereotypes and tropes and whatnot, but it doesn't mean their roles are unfamiliar. They're just more complex and elaborated than you might be used to seeing. You've seen the strict class representative before, both in male and female characters, but this time she's one of the main characters. You might have seen the quiet, introverted literature club girl before, but I assure you, not like this. The fragile, beautiful, popular girl? Yeah, I've seen her too. But babe, you haven't seen her like I have in Maidens. Seriously, all the characters feel fresh yet familiar, unique yet relatable, complex yet approachable, flawed yet lovable. Each of the main characters has their own story to tell and obstacles to go through. The author made sure to give each of them the proper time to go through said obstacles and to grow as they conquer them. Their path remains a simple one, growing up, but it's not like one grows up over the short course of a school year. I love that despite their growth and development, they don't necessarily become different people. They just come to new realizations about themselves, and the way they see the world around them is different due to that. I hate when characters go through tons of changes in such short times. I don't vibe with that, but the author of Maidens put these characters on the right track for further positive development. You won't see it, but you know they'll keep growing, and if that's not beautiful writing, I don't know what is. Finally, I'd like to quickly chat about the art style. We've talked about how this series, despite its topics and intended audience, doesn't really feel like a shoujo, or a manga that's particularly meant for girls, and that's partly because it looks nothing like one. The art style is actually really akin to what you'd see in shonen manga. The line work really reminds me of Katsura Hoshino's The Gray Man, Minayuki Kanashiro's Blue Lock, and Satsuki Yoshino's Barakamon or Hanakun. The art is extremely dynamic, expressive, and even a little raw sometimes, which isn't necessarily the usual for manga intended for girls. Not that manga intended for girls is bad art, not at all, but I've seen it to have a more polished, glossy look. Sort of like in Princess Jellyfish or anything by Io Sakikaza, which I'm a big fan of. Actually, the artist, Naoi Moto, has drawn other series that all have a more shonen vibe to them. Among them is Forget Me Not, which is a great series. Highly recommend it. Who knows, maybe I'll make a video about it. Now, I've told you about what I liked about this series. Maybe I should tell you about something I disliked about it. It's only fair. Beware though, minor spoiler ahead. This series doesn't really have a proper antagonist, but I guess you could say there's a character that comes pretty close to being one. He is one of the main character's theater instructor / director, and he's known her since she was very young. And it is heavily implied that he's a sexual deviant, aka he's sexually attracted to children. Girls specifically, which is like a big no-no. The thing that really bothers me is that he doesn't really get punished, or like nothing happens to him. Sure, he gets punched in the face and it's amazing, but like nothing gets resolved as far as his deviancy is concerned. Parents aren't informed, he doesn't get arrested, he doesn't get fired, nothing. Like he's still a giant threat to tons of children, yet that's not really brought up. The story does make sure though to let the viewer know that he has never acted on his shady urges, so nothing legal has happened, I guess. But still, as cool as it was to see him get decked in the face, I was still hoping for a more definite end to his shenanigans. Like, hey, maybe he got fired and will not be coaching children. So, with all that said, should you check out this manga? I really think you should. I think it's important for people to have access to fiction that represents women realistically. For sure, at the end of the day, it's still fiction, and not every woman will feel represented in this story. Nor am I implying that every woman out there will relate to these characters. But I felt like it gave a really fresh, honest look at what it can look like for young women growing up today. I wish I could have read this when I was growing up, because it would have made me feel like at the end of the day, regardless of gender or sexuality, we're all people going through a difficult, confusing time. Maybe it would have given me the confidence to talk to the girl I wanted to talk to even. Actually, knowing me, it probably would have ruined it by saying something like, well, I read in a manga that girls think about sex too, so, want to think about it with me? And then I would have gotten rejected super hard. But yeah, all in all, yes, please, check out this manga. It's one of the good ones for sure. Before ending the video though, I want to acknowledge that, as a man, my opinion and experience of these characters and the story, which deal mostly with young women, should be taken as just that, an opinion. My experience may differ from yours and from the targeted audience. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, the last thing I want is to seem like I'm mansplaining a story that was written by women with the purpose of being appreciated by women. I'm just some guy and I enjoyed this series and I just wanted to talk about it. Well, that was Oh Maidens in your Savage Season. I hope you enjoyed this little review, and if you did enjoy it, consider subscribing. This was MangAnalysis, and I'll see you in the next one.